everyone! Today we're talking about... wait a second. 今日は日本の食べ物について話したいと思います。That's right, we're finally talking about gluten-free in Japan. I had originally planned to make this video after traveling back there, but because, you know, everyone's been on lockdown, Japan's been on lockdown for a while, I thought might as well make this video now and maybe help you in your preparation for eventually traveling there. So I've been to Japan 3 times. Only once as a celiac and 2 times as a language school exchange. The reason I wanted to make this video is because so many people have told me that they'd love to travel to Japan but don't really know about what they can eat, so have been somewhat put off. But I just love Japan so much, so I think it would be a terrible shame if you didn't travel there just because of dietary requirements. So we're going to cover all bases about eating gluten-free in Japan, and if you don't feel convinced at the end of it, I'll take that as a personal fail. But also, quick warning, a couple of my first topics might not make you feel so hopeful, but we'll get to all the good stuff at the end. Let's start with talking a little bit about celiac disease in Japan. From a 2013 study, it was estimated that only 0.19% of people in Japan probably have celiac disease, and that's compared to 1% in places like the UK, the US, Australia and New Zealand. Which means that unfortunately for us, in Japan there is very little awareness of what celiac disease is. I can say with almost 100% certainty, if you say to someone in a restaurant that you have celiac disease, you will be met with a very polite but very confused look. So that's not something that's really on our side, but the term gluten-free is slowly coming to be more recognised in the main centres especially. I do mean quite slowly though. I would say I got about a 1 out of 5 hit rate with the term gluten-free in restaurants in Tokyo. But it's only going to get better. Now we're going to talk about some of the main dishes that you're very likely to find in Japan and whether or not they would be naturally safe for gluten-free people. You might think that Japan would be good for gluten-free food if your only idea of Japanese food is sashimi and sushi, in which case, yes, they can be gluten-free, but sashimi and sushi are a small part of such a wonderful array of Japanese cuisine. Unfortunately, not a lot of them are very gluten-free friendly, but we're going to speed through them anyway and we'll talk about what you're most likely to come across. So first up, sashimi and sushi. Basically, just raw fish and rice. You would think that this was 100% gluten-free if you just say to hold the soy sauce. However, some sushi places use a wheat-based sushi vinegar in their rice, so it wouldn't necessarily be considered gluten-free. However, not all of the types of vinegars contain gluten. It's actually more traditional to use a rice vinegar. So I've heard that if you find a more traditional sushi shop, it's more likely going to be gluten-free. The other thing, of course, which you need to be careful of and which will become a theme throughout these foods is soy sauce. Whether it's drizzled on top or served on the side, beware. Ramen! Such a wonderful, soul-warming, delicious meal, not naturally gluten-free. But I do know some places that do a gluten-free version and we'll talk about them soon. Tempura! Also delicious, not normally gluten-free, however some places do use a rice flour batter for their mix, in which case it would be. You just gotta check first. Kare rice. This is a Japanese curry and you'd think, oh, curry, that's usually gluten-free. Hold your horses, not in this case. Wheat flour is usually used as the thickener for the curry. You can obviously find gluten-free versions, but generally it won't be. Okonomiyaki, a delicious, eggy, savoury pancake from Japan. Unfortunately, the batter that is used is made from wheat flour, and they also have a sauce on top called okonomiyaki sauce, which usually contains soy sauce. Shabu-Shabu. Okay, here's a potentially gluten-free one. Hooray! Shabu-Shabu is a hot pot where you boil your meat and vegetables in and then eat them with a dipping sauce. If the shabu-shabu hot pot is just water, then it's totally fine, but you've just got to make sure that it is water instead of maybe a chicken broth or a soy sauce based broth. And obviously be aware of what their dipping sauces are as well. Miso soup. Sometimes gluten-free, although I feel like it's more common to be gluten-free outside of Japan. But you can find gluten-free miso in Japan. Yakitori. Also sometimes gluten-free. Yakitori is basically barbecued meat on a stick. and it's usually cooked with a soy sauce based glaze or just salt. Provided you don't think that there would be a risk of cross-contamination on the grills, maybe they cook them on separate grills, then the salted variety would absolutely be gluten-free. Annoyingly, the words for salt and soy sauce are a little bit similar. Salt is shio and soy sauce is shoyu. But we'll get into some useful phrases at the end. Onigiri. Sometimes, especially the plain ones, can be gluten-free. Onigiri is a rice ball, or well, a rice triangle, I guess, that you can find literally anywhere. There are so many flavors of onigiri, but the ones you're probably most likely to find that are gluten-free are just the salted shio onigiri, just salted plain rice. Actually quite delicious. Umeboshi, which is pickled plum, definitely interesting. I would say try it at least once. And plain salmon or tuna. The key word in all of these being plain. Unfortunately, the ones that have mayo usually have Japanese mayo, which is unfortunately not gluten-free. However, the good thing about this is these normally come packaged with all the allergens listed on the back, so you can clearly see which ones you can have. Udon. These beautiful, delicious, thick noodles are unfortunately not gluten-free. But oh, how I wish they were. Soba. Okay, this is an interesting one because traditionally the noodles themselves would be 100% gluten-free as they're made out of buckwheat flour. However, these days the buckwheat flour is mixed with wheat flour, so they wouldn't be considered gluten-free, but there are still places that serve the 100% buckwheat flour soba, which you'd be able to eat at. Just obviously be wary of the broth or whatever condiments are served on the side. Natto. This is another interesting one. Not a lot of Westerners are a fan of natto, which is basically just fermented soybeans. By themselves, they are actually gluten-free. However, they're usually served with soy sauce or some sort of flavoring which does contain gluten, but by themselves, they're gluten-free. It's not one that I've tried yet, but it's on my list. Takoyaki. Fried octopus balls are one of the most famous street foods from Osaka. However, the batter itself does contain wheat flour and the sauce on top contains soy sauce. So not one for us, unfortunately. Donburi, such as gyudon, katsudon, or yakodon. Another, sometimes gluten-free. Donburi is basically a bowl of rice with different meats on top. Gyudon is beef, katsudon is pork, and oyakodon is chicken and egg. The last one's my favorite because it translates to parent and child donburi, because you're eating the chicken and the egg, so like the parent and the child. Kind of sad, but it's funny. You'll have to check what goes into your donburi. Soy sauce is a common ingredient, but you definitely can find ones without. One of my favorite meals I had in Japan was a rice bowl. I'm not sure if it comes under donburi, but it's called tamago kake gohan, which is just egg, raw egg over warm rice. But it was also with sashimi, so I don't know the full name of it. You might think, what? Raw egg, raw fish, and rice? I know, but trust me, one of the most delicious things I've ever eaten in my entire life, and that's coming from someone that doesn't like raw things. So if you have a chance to try that one, I'd say definitely give it a go. Obviously, check to make sure no soy sauce has been put in it, but it is delicious. Tamago kake gohan is actually like a comfort dish, I believe, in Japan. Edamame. Probably something you're familiar with, and yes, naturally gluten-free. It's literally just soybeans. You've just got to watch out for the toppings, like soy sauce. Matcha, another naturally gluten-free one. It is just pure grounded Japanese green tea leaves. I know matcha can sometimes be an acquired taste, but I would say just try it in Japan at least once before you make a final judgment. Gyoza. Sadly, no, dumplings are not gluten-free naturally in Japan, but I have a recipe on how to make some delicious gluten-free ones. You can find it here. Tofu, by itself, yes. With other things, depends. Tamagoyaki, not gluten-free. Tamagoyaki is a sweetened Japanese rolled omelette. You might think, what the heck, how is that not gluten-free? It's an omelette, it's just eggs. Unfortunately, it is flavored with soy sauce and dashi, so it would make it not gluten-free. Mochi, this is naturally gluten-free. Yay! It's made purely from pounded sticky rice to make this squashy and delicious treat. It comes in so many different varieties, so it goes without saying, just check what they've filled it with or what's on top before you dive into it. Okay, so that's all the main dishes that I wanted to mention. How are we feeling? Are feeling a bit dejected? Feeling like, why the heck have I made this video if I'm just gonna tell you can't eat most of the things? Well, just hold the phone. Almost all of these dishes I have found a gluten-free version of in Japan. So there is hope for us yet. But just before we talk about those, I want to talk a little bit about restaurant etiquette in Japan. There are many different and unique table manners in Japan, which I would suggest is a good idea to have a little bit of a research on before you go, whether you're gluten-free or not. Like such as what's the polite way to use chopsticks, showing gratitude for the meal by starting with itadakimasu and finishing with gochisousama deshita. But I wanted to talk about the things that would be more specific to gluten-free dining. In Japanese restaurants, it's not very common or polite to ask the chef to change a meal for you. So where you might live, it might be totally okay to say, can I have the chips instead of the salad, or could you put the dressing on the side? In Japan, that's not really the most polite thing to do. Obviously, I'm talking about places where you're ordering dishes like set meals. There are plenty of places where you will get the choice to choose condiments, meats, all of that jazz, but I'm talking about places where you're just ordering a dish. If that makes you feel a bit nervous, don't worry. This can all be sorted if you talk to someone or call up beforehand and tell them about your dietary requirements. If the waitstaff or the chefs don't think that they can feed you, they will say so, which I actually kind of appreciate because you don't feel like you're taking any risks. I will give you some phrases at the end on how to communicate dietary requirements, but a really good thing to do is have a Japanese restaurant card that explains in Japanese very clearly what you can and can't eat. The best one I've found is from Legal Nomad's blog, which I will link in the description box below. Jody has gotten it looked over by 2 different translators. It uses local language and also offers suggestions on what you actually can eat. Some other translation cards that I've found are sometimes a little bit too generic, or on the other end, a little bit too complicated and start talking about autoimmune diseases and celiac disease, which no one really understands. So yeah, if you were looking for one, definitely check out the one on Legal Nomad's blog. Let's talk about some of the wonderful places that we can eat safely. Hopefully I haven't scared you off yet, and if not, wonderful, I have some great news. There are 100% gluten-free restaurants in Tokyo. There are gluten-free versions of every single dish that I mentioned before, so you don't feel like you are missing out. Just a tiny point of bad news, since the lockdown, a few of the gluten-free places have had to shut down due to the lack of tourists, and tourists being their main business. I imagine once we're all traveling back there again, the gluten-free restaurant business will thrive once more. But anyway, Tokyo is by far the best place in Japan to eat gluten-free. There are even dedicated gluten-free bakeries. Some of my favorite places that I ate are Gluten Free Tea's Kitchen. This wonderful restaurant is located in Roppongi, which is a popular nightlife district for foreigners in Japan. This place has a huge and extensive menu of Japanese goodies like this karaage chicken and these beautiful chiffon cakes. I went here on my last night in Japan and I really wish I didn't because it meant that I wasn't able to go again. Otaku Bakery. This bakery is in Asakusa, which is another very popular tourist area of Tokyo. You might be familiar with the image of Sensoji Temple. It's quite a popular one that they use for like Tokyo tourism. So just behind this temple, there is an amazing bakery that makes the most delicious, beautiful variety of chiffon cakes made out of 100% rice flour. They are the softest and the lightest things you will ever eat. I'd say stock up on them. If you're going outside of Tokyo, just take a few with you. Soda Noido Nippon. I went here a few times because one of their branches is very conveniently located in Tokyo Station. This is where you can get your delicious gluten-free ramen. You order through this vending machine type thing and there will be someone there to help you to direct you to the gluten-free option. There are a few branches of this place, but I've only ever been to the Tokyo Station one, so I'm not entirely sure what the gluten-free options are like at the other places. If you've been, let me know, pop that in the comments. There are heaps of other places to eat in Tokyo, but I don't have time for them all. One place that I wanted to mention, because I think it's just like the cutest, is a restaurant called Where is a Dog? I didn't get to go there, but apparently the whole place is just filled with cat paraphernalia, and there is one single dog thing in the entire restaurant, which you have to find. Where is a dog? So that's on my list for next time. Heading out of Tokyo now, let's go to Kyoto. There are definitely less options of eating gluten-free here, but not impossible to find. I ate at 2 places while I was there. The first one was Yak and Yeti. This is a wonderful restaurant from food from Nepal, which I didn't realize was naturally gluten-free. The staff all speak English and they understand allergies, so they were really helpful with dining there as well. The other place I went to was Einsof Japan. I've never really been sure on how to say that one. But this is a vegan restaurant predominantly. They do obviously have gluten-free options, but the best thing about it is their menu is very clearly marked on what you can and can't eat. There's also a few branches of this place. I think there's 3 in Tokyo, so you could go here if you're in Tokyo as well. The last place I want to mention, which is a bit random, is Kawaguchiko, which is a very small town that is close to Mount Fuji. The best meal of my entire life was eaten here at a place called Shore's Sushi Dining and Bar. I would 100% recommend the vegetable tempura sushi platter. Their tempura batter is made out of rice flour, and not only that, they actually have gluten-free soy sauce on the tables for you. It's amazing. Honestly, you have to visit, not just because of the amazing views of Mount Fuji, but because of this particular sushi platter. I could talk about delicious places to eat in Japan all day, but you know, we don't have time for that. There's lots of wonderful blogs that have that. Legal Nomads blog that I mentioned before has a wonderful guide with lots of different cities and lots of different places to eat, so I'll chuck that in description as well. Eating outside the main centers. Now, as you travel outside the main centers of Japan, finding gluten-free food to eat does get a little bit more difficult, but don't let that put you off from visiting some of the most wonderful, beautiful towns around Japan. And some of my favorite places to visit are the smaller towns. But Morgan, how are we gonna eat? I have 3 very helpful suggestions for you. One of the best things that I like about Japanese cuisine is that there are so many food stalls that focus on one particular dish. And that can be extremely helpful for us gluten-free people because it really reduces the risk of cross-contamination. For example, as I mentioned before, yakitori, the fried meat on the stick, if you can find a place that cooks that without salt, then you're in luck. There are actually a lot of places that just do sort of barbecue meat type things depending on where you are in the country, so you could also be in luck with that. Another thing to look out for, which I didn't mention, is dango. Dango is similar to mochi in the way that it's made out of rice flour and water, but it's made in a different way to mochi, so it's not quite the same. They are these soft and sticky balls. You've probably seen them in like Japanese animated films, and they come in sweet and savory varieties. Unfortunately, one of the most common flavor is made with like a sweet sticky soy sauce, but pretty much the rest of the flavors are all naturally gluten-free. If you aren't having much luck with street food, don't worry, because no matter where you are in Japan, you're probably quite close to a konbini or a convenience store. Here you can find a variety of goodies such as your onigiri rice balls, rice crackers, crisps, fruits, drinks, mochi, etc, etc. I'd say about 50% of my meals outside of Tokyo were from convenience stores. Unfortunately, there isn't a gluten-free section, but everything is very well labeled. So what you're going to want to do is have the Google Translator app on your phone. You literally just have something, get the ingredients on the back, scan it with the Google Translator app, and then it will come up with like what the ingredients are. Just so you have an idea of what it looks like, here's a couple of examples of what the ingredients look like on the back of a package. So we've got a rice ball, and I think these were a packet of crisps. You can see on the packet of crisp that there is this like lovely blue box, and that's actually the allergen box, which is extremely helpful, and we'll get into a little bit later on what to look out for with the allergen box. So we made so many delicious lunches with food from konbini, like cheese and cracker platters with like ham and grapes. Oh my god, the fruit in Japan is amazing. You have to try, especially the grapes and the strawberries. They're out of this world. My last suggestion is finding a hotel that offers breakfast and can cater for dietary requirements. That's just one less meal that you have to worry about in the day. It can be quite helpful. You might have to do a little bit of searching because they won't all offer catering towards dietary requirements, but there are definitely some that do. I made the mistake of not asking when I went to a ryokan, which is a traditional Japanese inn where you sleep on like futon and beautiful tatami matted rooms and that, and breakfast is pretty much always included. It wasn't until I was chatting to another guest at breakfast that I found out that they had catered to her low salt diet that I realized, oh, they probably could have done a gluten-free one for me as well. But also just general travel advice, make a point to stay in a ryokan. They're just wonderful. This was the view from my window of Mount Fuji at the ryokan I stayed at. This was actually the same town that I had like my sushi platter in. So wonderful experience all around. The last topic that I wanted to briefly touch on is that there are actually gluten-free tours of Japan available. So what you do is you can actually book before you go. They sort out all of the accommodation, some of the meals, and the travel. One of the places I found was glutenfreetoursjapan.com.au. Yeah, and basically you can just book a self-guided or group tour through them, and they take all the pressure off trying to research and find out where to eat. The downside to that is that it is quite pricey. One of the group tours I found was 8,800 Australian dollars, and the self-guided one were around $4,000 to $5,000 Australian dollars as well. And what that includes is accommodation, meals, Wi-Fi, an on-call person to help you with gluten-free eating, and travel around Japan. But not flights. So that's a nice option to have, especially if you've got the money for it. But also know that it's not necessary and you can do without. Maybe I could make like a wee itinerary for you guys. Like a wee little Japan itinerary full of like gluten-free spots to eat and stuff. Let me know if you'd like that. That would be kind of fun. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some phrases and words that might be helpful for you. First, let's do the danger words. Also, side note, just apologies if my intonation is rubbish. Wheat is komugi. Barley is omugi. Rye is raimugi. Noticing a pattern here? Yes, the mugi. This kanji for the mugi is one that is good to familiarize yourself with so you know what you're looking out for. Soy sauce is shoyu. Gluten is gluten. There is another word for gluten, but it's not very commonly used, so stick with gluten. The best way to explain that you can't eat gluten is by calling it an allergy. There is no point trying to figure out the word and grammar around how to explain autoimmune diseases, so we're going to go with allergy for this one. A very basic way to say this is, we'll use wheat. Komugi ni alergi ga arimasu. Komugi ni alergi ga arimasu. So I have an allergy to wheat. So that's a good one to know as well. One last one, if there's an option to have soy sauce, let's learn how to say without soy sauce please, which is shoyu nashi de onegai shimasu. That's a bit of a long one, so just remember shoyu nashi de. Onegai shimasu is just like a polite request word thing, I think. Actually, also another one to have under the belt that's quite helpful is sumimasen, nihongo ga wakarimasen, which is, I'm sorry, I don't understand Japanese. I use that a lot. Or you could ask if there was anyone that speaks English, in which case you'd say, Eigo ga hanaseru hito wa imasu ka? Which is there anyone that speaks English? Or, you know, scrap all that and just hand them a restaurant card. Okay, I have a feeling this is a really long video so far, so I'm just about to end it. I hope I've convinced you that traveling to Japan is a good idea. Are you convinced yet? Please say yes. Anyway, I hope this video was in some way useful and hopefully convinced you that Japan is a wonderful place to visit. Please let me know if there is any other topics around eating gluten-free in Japan that you'd like me to cover. I'm absolutely happy to make another video around it. And also, let me know if you'd like sort of like a wee eating itinerary, maybe in Tokyo and Kyoto. I'm happy to make one up for you and like do a little PDF if that's something that you'd find useful. Obviously, we're not really traveling at the moment, but you know, for the future. Yeah, so let me know if that's something you want. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, that would really help me out, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!